The People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, presents Nation Watch.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to today's special edition of Nation Watch. Today, Monday, 19 December 2022, as we approach the Christmas holidays. We couldn't be with you yesterday because we didn't want to interrupt your World Cup football finals, but we're here today, and with me in studio this evening is the leader of the People's National Congress Reform and the leader of the opposition, Mr. Aubrey Norton. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, and thanks for having me.
Let's start with issues that are occurring and that are obviously causing some unease in our society. Recently, Mr. Jagdeo has been reported as questioning the accountability and transparency in the operations of the mayor and city council of the city of Georgetown. Today, there was a press conference where the mayor and his deputy addressed a number of issues. What's your take, sir, on Mr. Jagdeo's suggestion that accountability issues afflict City Hall and that has some problems with transfer of funds?
First of all, as I understand it, they did audit City Hall, and I don't know that they have found anything to suggest that they're not accountable. But that apart, Jagdeo has no moral right to even mention the word accountability. This is a man who believes he owns Guyana and accounts for nothing. This nation should ask Jagdeo to account for the spending of the European money, which he purported to build Skeldon with. This nation should ask if Jagdeo was accountable when they were doing the fiber optic cable. This country should ask Jagdeo if he was accountable when he was taking NIS money to put wherever he wanted and went as far as actually implicating people, affecting their lives. In this case, the action of the government has no doubt affected one of the managers at New Building Society. And so this is not somebody who has any right to mention anything about accountability. He has been the most unaccountable person. And what is worse is that this is a man in which journalists went undercover virtually, and serious allegations were made against him as it relates to bribery and corruption. Now he operates as if he alone is entitled to wrongdoings and that he has some right. In this case, there's no wrongdoing on the part of the mayor and city council, but by his approach, he is suggesting that, yeah, I could do as I like, I could do wrong. But when others do it, then I have the right to act and not transfer funds. I believe that what you have is an authoritarian, if not a dictatorial person, calling himself a leader. That is the reality of Barra Jagdeo. We see what they're doing with oil resources, just spending it as they like, doing as they like. There is no structured program to ensure the people of Guyana benefit and the quality of their life improve. So I think Guyanese must see Jagdeo for what he is, a man who has no moral right to mention the words accountability, transparency, and democracy.
Mayor Aubrey Norton had said on this program a couple of Sundays ago that the government of Guyana is indebted to the mayor and city council to the tune of in excess of $1 billion. He spoke about the entitlement of the city of Georgetown to benefit from somewhere in the region of between $300 and $600 million per annum through fiscal transfer legislation. This has not been coming, but a lot has been happening in the city in terms of rainfall and garbage disposal requirements and so on that the city has not been able to address. So here is a situation where the city is now being accused of not delivering on its statutory mandate, but the reality is that they're being starved of resources, and now they're being accused of not being accountable.
Historically, the PPP ones in government starve all AP and UAFC control councils because for them, it's a way of making the council look bad. Now, what they have done as well is, apart from starving them, they are giving small of influencing people to vote for them so that a few people could say, oh, we made some money. But the reality is the People's Progressive Party has always punished Georgetown. The only thing that probably worry them sometimes is that when it flood out, people recognize the reality. Now, the central government should be working with the mayor and city council, but they just don't. What they do is stifle the council in every fashion. Now, the flooding that would have occurred has to be placed squarely at the foot of the People's Progressive Party. When you look at their attempt, first of all, they waited until the rainy season is virtually here to clean, which is marked stupidity on their part. But if one does a comparison of when we were in government, in the border area, people tell me that when we came to government, they stopped flooding. And even if water came up, by the time the rain stopped and down, now they are doing so bad a job, apart from stifling the city council. If you stifle the city council and you had the competence to do the work, to ensure that the place is drained, etc., then people might not have worried as much. But they starve the city council, and then they are manifestly incompetent, and therefore the city isn't drained. And as you would have seen over the last couple of days, it had become the order of the day that everybody's in a long boots. You couldn't venture out recently in Georgetown without the long boots, because virtually every area. And then as they clean, they are not putting the mechanisms in place to pick up. For instance, I saw some work in South, and you knew by the time the rain come, everything was going back into the drain. I've said consistently, this government doesn't have a plan for the development of people, for the development of communities. This government's approach is one of having projects so that they can fortify themselves as a result of corruption. And every time you see they operate, you know that it is not a structured approach. It is basically they're propagandizing and they are preparing the base. If you look at what they're doing in sport, you will see the aim is not to promote sports and to promote the development of athletes. The aim is to politicize sport with the hope that they will benefit. Now, we're glad that footballers and some people are benefiting, but clearly that approach is not one that will allow athletes to develop. And so the government's approach to sport is, in my opinion, a manifestation of their incompetence. So it's not only the city council, virtually every area. I had warned very early that it didn't make sense to do the road coming through from the East Bank in the way it was done. I did say then that what will happen is that you will now shift the burdens to the people on Sheriff Street. To drive Sheriff Street now is a nightmare because of the incompetence of this government. All and sundry knew that the original plan was to come from Timeri, or even if you were coming from Diamond area, you would have gone straight to Oval and do cut-off roads. So people who have to go on the East Coast, way up the East Coast, don't have to come through Georgetown.
Right.
So now you have double indemnity. You're coming down the East Bank and you have problems at Diamond, whereas where you used to have the problem alone. And you punish your way, and once you got past the Harbor Bridge, you were okay. Not so now. If you're coming down the East Bank, you have the problem at Diamond. And then those who cut off from Diamond and come through the new road, they have now to deal with the traffic jam on Sheriff Street. And then, as if common sense doesn't exist, they're suggesting they're widening the street in Prashad Nagar to help take off. And if you see the street in Prashad Nagar, it is heading into a trench. So they're building no bridge, so you're going straight over. So they're going to put you in another dead end. This government, I said before, government sees these projects as a means of corruption, as a means of putting resources in the hands of themselves, their friends, their families, and favorites. That is the reality.
Following up on Mayor Ubraj-Narain's representation here, a few days later, the Ministry of Works, I believe it was, attempted to, well, in fact, they had started to move some structures there where the vendors were operating on New Market Street in violation of the local government laws. Mayor Ubraj-Narain stood in defense of his elected mandate, stood in defense of the people who elected him and whom he and his councillors serve. It appeared to the casual onlooker that Mayor Ubraj-Narain's revelations on Nation Watch may have also conspired against him. He was arrested. Parliamentarian Sheriff Duncan had joined him, and he too was arrested. Is this not government excess? Is this not executive lawlessness on the part of this regime?
It's way past executive lawlessness. It is dictatorial. Now, they have virtually said by their actions, there's no freedom of speech, which is something guaranteed in the Constitution. They are misusing the cybercrime legislation to virtually silence everyone. Mind you, Jagdeo made some outlandish statements and the police doesn't visit him. Vincent Alexander had to sue him. Let us also recognize he did say a number of things about Ipadeji because he wanted to take away the subvention that they get. So what you have here is a dictator who basically is seeking to use state power against anyone who stands up for principle, for democracy. So it is not just of someone who feels he's not accountable to anyone. And then if you look at the culture he's creating in the PPP, it's as if he alone must speak. You wouldn't see a situation where ministers are doing press conferences on their portfolio. I am still to see a press conference by any of the ministers
Or the president for that matter.
or the president in which they deal with their portfolio and answer questions, etc., and be accountable. It all has to pass through Lord God Jack Dale. And so, even inside the People's Progressive Party, you're seeing his hands of domination, control, and dictatorship. I believe that Barra Jack Dale is bad news for Guyana. And what makes it worse is that he has never succeeded in doing anything. The economy was mismanaged under him. It is he who created the confusion on the East Bank by refusing whatever little gray matter he has to use that gray matter to say a common sense thing. You cannot build a large housing scheme with one entrance and one exit. You are creating confusion. He has not shown that he can do anything successfully except wield dictatorial power. I've said on one occasion, I would like for him to give to this nation the list of things that he would have done that would have benefited this country. Something as simple as passports. When we were in government, we streamlined the issuance, application and issuance of passports. Now you're telling people you have to wait more than a month for a passport. We are retrogressing. The incompetence of the PPP is producing harm for our people. The lines had long gone from the immigration office. They have returned. And they have returned because of the PPP incompetence. And so there are a number of problems that the society is facing at this stage that are the direct creation of PPP incompetence. I just tell you about a passport. Listen to the staff at Ministry of Social Services, and they're telling you about the incompetence, they're telling you about the racism, they're telling you about the employment, allegedly because they are linked to the minister and the minister. If you turn to youth and sport,
That one
you
is
are
serious.
seeing the incompetence, the arrogance, and the unnecessary mismanagement. Artists are complaining that why something as simple as permission for the culture center, the National Culture Center, has to be determined by a minister. He must have got nothing to do. If you're a minister and you have policies to implement, you will have time to be vetting who rent the culture center when it is reported that a particular artist who performed on an APNU AFC program was ordered out of the National Cultural Center. So they don't care whether the person is an artist anymore. For them, it is political. And if this artist isn't serving their interests, then they have no right to access to the culture center, which is misplaced. The National Culture Center was a venue created years ago by the government of Guyana to ensure that people could practice their art, practice whatever skills they have, and bring a certain level of cultural presentation to the people of Guyana.
To add to that, it is being alleged that a very close relative of the minister was given responsibility for managing the cricket carnival. And that's a technical job, obviously. And clearly they couldn't find anyone within the ministry to do the job. So he had to source it allegedly to a
Well,
relative.
they have been denuding the ministry of its professional competence. And therefore, I gather from just listening to what people are saying Their good friends at Kashif and Shanghai are complaining that the minister has virtually taken away all that they used to do and is doing it himself. And so it should be obvious to people that this is political domination and control. It's not about the development of youth. It's not about the development of sport. It's not about the development of culture. There has not been one single document out of the ministry produced on youth problems and then plans to solve those problems. So what in essence you have is telling people that he don't like youth in sport, he think he's fit for somewhere else. But his bosses don't feel he's fit for that. And so he does nothing except contribute.
Mr. Norton, I want to zero in back, if I may, on this Ubraj Narain Sharad Duncan issue. Organizations such as, I believe, the Private Sector Commission and the Ghana Defense Force, among others, have, in some instances, made pronouncements, and in the case of the Ghana Defense Force, taken action. These statements and this action, evidently, they are not rooted in an understanding of what really gave rise to what happened. It appears as though no one wants to speak to the root cause of this problem. People simply seem to be zeroing in on what the mayor may have asked rhetorically, or the fact that he impeded the flow of traffic by putting his body there in defense of the people. The root cause of this problem really is a minister overstepping his lawful remit. Speak to this issue, please, sir.
Well, it is a minute. It speaks to before the minister. We meet the minister stepping outside of his remit. This government came to power promising 50,000 jobs. As they cannot deliver the jobs, people are finding alternative ways to exist. People have a right to earn. So many of these persons recognize that this area is a lucrative area to do business. People come into the hospital, etc. And so they were doing it in caravans. I don't believe it's accident. These people are just for the Christmas. I don't think it is by accident that they chose this period to move them. It is all part of the political wickedness. Now, what we come now to the issue of jurisdiction. It is well established that New Market Street is not a public road and therefore doesn't fall under the Ministry of Public Works. And so the minister sends out a notice. First, he should have been in consultation with City Hall, but because their aim is to destroy local democracy and to destroy City Hall, he proceeded in an arbitrary way to use the force at the disposal to move the persons. We went out there, we met with the people. Mayor Aubrey Norton stood with them, and he has the right to protest. He has the right to protest. Irfan Ali was involved in virtually turning over a vehicle with Minister Karen Cummins. He wasn't charged for damage to property.
Or anything for that.
Or
matter.
anything whatsoever. But the mayor lies down on the road and you charge him for obstructing traffic. Clearly, it's an abuse of power. It's a misuse of power. And therefore, what one sees is a breakdown in the rule of law generally. And because Minister Edghill would have violated the protocols and convention, Mayor Aubrey Norton was forced to take the action he took. In the case of Sherrod, they had that charge pending. They were just waiting for something to charge him about. In fact, I believe they are targeting all key APNU AFC persons to charge.
Well, don't I know about that?
Well, you know about it because they sought to fabricate something and go in that direction. Now, what you're seeing is the destruction of the fabric of the society. When you violate law, when you are not constrained by anything in law, then you operate in the way the PPP operates. People are telling you, I'm meeting Guyanese who they are quoting, even among the artists, and they are telling you that when they meet the president, he behaves arrogantly. I merely say to them, look, it's your money, take it. But no, you don't vote for them because their behavior is an indication that they do not care about the people of Guyana and they don't intend to improve the quality of life.
Norton. The government gave a contract for the construction of a market at Monrepo on the east coast of Demerara, where vending is taking place on the road. The traffic is impeded. It is virtually impossible to pass through there in half an hour. Nobody's charged for obstruction of traffic. The vendors, dissatisfied with the design of the market and the allocation of spaces, reportedly protested and damaged government property. We have not heard of the police visiting anyone. We have not heard of the police expressing an interest in interviewing anyone. No one has pay for that. And now the damaged property will have to be rebuilt. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, people vending in a controlled environment because the mayor was clear that he had spoken with them before and asked them to ensure that they abided by certain conditions. And a minister oversteps his lawful authority, involves the police in the exercise of this extra legal authority that he's assumed. Persons have been arrested. Persons are now displaced. Some people can no longer earn between now and Christmas. People have tuition fees to pay, people have children to feed, people have food to put on the table. It is the Christmas season, the season of goodwill. Compare for us the two
First of all,
events.
let me say this. I think the vendors at Monrepo had a right to protest.
Mhm.
And their right to protest come from the fact that if you're building these things for these people, then you should consult them
Yep.
and know what they want and try to operate in keeping with what will cause them to apply their trade properly. So
Good.
you see here the government's unwillingness to consult, even in its own constituency.
Yeah.
We now come to the different strokes for different folks. What they seem to do, the Minister of Public Works, as I understand it, has responsibility for that road.
The one at Monrepo.
Correct. That's a
Right.
public road. Where he would not have had to consult with the NDC, he could have moved them. But he opted not to because it is the PPP constituency. But when it comes to Georgetown, where it is the APNU constituency, he opts to step over his bounds to move them. Now, as it relates to the law, do I have established that the vendors at Monrepo had a right to protest because of the government's unwillingness to consult and to involve them? That apart, they have violated. If the government interest was in law and order, there are charges. To the extent that they didn't bring it, shows the bias. Because here is a case now where there's also a legitimate right to protest. And this is not the obstruction of traffic in terms of the public moving in a particular direction. This is obstruction of traffic as far as they are concerned. I put it in quotation, in which you bring a truck and equipment to move people. In fact, if they were encumbering, the truck wouldn't be able to come in. So it was obvious that they weren't encumbering the area, and that it is pure vindictiveness. So that you charge the mayor, well, I think looking for Sherrod anyhow. So he's added. You know, I think they hate the fact that Sherrod exposes them online. You ever imagine what would have been the attitude of this government if social media didn't emerge? It would have been worse than 1992 to 2015. And the period when we were in government, we sought to set an example of how governance should be. And we didn't charge people willy-nilly, etc. But even with social media exposure, this government is prepared to violate the law. And so, the law. It is also the use of the law politically. The police should have been instructed to investigate Jack Dale because there were allegations against him that demanded investigation. The police clearly cannot do anything because their political bosses don't want them to do anything. But the same police can turn around and charge people. In fact, when the policeman at City Hall, I tried to work out if it's a case where he couldn't read or he was going against his will. Because in reading the charges, he didn't come over as a policeman who believed these people should be charged and was charging them. If it was a case where he actually can't read, that is another bad signal for the society. I hope it is the former, in which he didn't have a conviction. He didn't believe they should be charged. So we have to also recognize that the police is now being used as a weapon against people who they see as their political opponents. Now, the danger in that is what we're getting a lot of reports of. Policemen are now afraid, so that when PPP activists, etc., do things in the community, the police refuses to act. We have the case where the man from Denhamsdale, who was right up on the Irfan Ali when they went, beat up a young man, had no relationship to the PNC, beat up an innocent citizen.
And this is where you were
yes,
present and witnessed.
And actually all give statements to that effect. The police refuses to charge him. So what they have done is to signal that he can do that. But when the backlash comes and people in the community react against him, they will sing a different song. And that is why I'm saying the People's Progressive Party is creating tensions in the society, and they're pushing people to the brink.
Well, the gentleman you referred to has been rewarded with a contract.
Yes,
in the community.
Not only with a contract.
Against the will of the people.
Not only the contract, one that will damage the football playing area. And
one that disrespects local authority.
And he has no experience whatsoever in construction. His only experience seems to be in ignorance.
Let's briefly about another minister overstepping his lawful authority. And this is not me pronouncing on this. This was pronounced upon by the chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission. The minister of local government, she said, overstepped his lawful authority when he he issued orders delineating boundaries of constituencies. It appears as though the actions of this minister may have contributed in a very large way to the cancellation of nomination day and the attendant rescheduling of local government elections to a yet undetermined date. How would you treat
First
with
of
that?
all, let me say again, it's a manifestation of the incompetence. And it's really not the election commission chairman that pronounced. It's the APNU AFC that filed legal challenges in the courts. And when they recognize that they were in trouble because they're in total violation of the law, they are now trying to sand-dance to ensure that the matter doesn't get attention in the court. And so we have to remember that the matter is being challenged and it's a court matter. Credit to the chairman on this occasion. She accepted that it's a violation of law and says, as chairman of the Elections Commission, it's a violation of law. But she's a judge who should have known that. This is not an ordinary university graduate who doesn't know the law. She didn't do chemistry. She didn't do biology. She did law.
And she adjudicated in an elections petition matter.
Correct. So she must have known that there was the violation of law. However, they didn't recognize. We were paying careful attention and was only waiting for them to put the list out there so that we could point out what was happening. But let's go down a little more. Dharamlal is seeking to gerrymander boundaries. And this is what the Guyanese people must understand. In the PPP attempt to dominate all local authorities, what they're doing, they have identified those NDCs that the APNU AFC would normally win. And they are finding a nearby stronghold of the PPP to add to that NDC. In Mabaruma, an election in Mabaruma as is, the PNC, APNU, AFC can beat the PPP.
And have done that before.
And have done it before. Yeah. Now, when they add these new communities, they're adding communities in which the PPP dominate. So it is not a case of trying to improve local democracy. It's a case of gerrymandering the boundaries to give the PPP an advantage. And we have to continue, we'll continue to challenge it in court and expose them in public. Dharamlal has been contemptuous from the time he has been in parliament. And you don't have, he has no sophistication in terms of language and approach. So it is a brute kind of contemptuousness. And it has to be challenged because the sole purpose of what he's doing is seeking to gerrymander boundaries. The commission has agreed today, I gather, that they are going to send people out there, etc. But when you listen to the language, it's as if they're trying to go out there to come back and say, we agree with the government.
Precisely.
And I hope that the chairman of the Elections Commission, the CEO of the Elections Commission are recognizing that they are allowing the gerrymandering of boundaries to win election. It's a form of rigging elections. And so this should be known to the people of Guyana. These changes in the boundaries are changes aimed at adding support where the PPP falls short so that they can win. And it is in that context we have to see what is happening. Mind you, there's a piece of legislation coming in Parliament in which they're trying to create a single window. I read it time to reread it again. What they are doing by this legislation is virtually removing the power from local authorities, etc. And everything will have to pass through the government.
The target is really Georgetown City Council.
Yeah. Competent with what they have. Why would they believe if they add more they will look better. They will just magnify the incompetence. But for them, they will get control and remove authority from the city council and other NDCs, etc. Thing has to pass through. And the people who passing through are incompetent. We are where we are in this elections commission fiasco because we chose not the best candidate to be CEO. The elections commission chose a candidate that isn't equipped for the job. And the problems you're seeing is a manifestation of that incompetence. And they're now going to magnify, enlarge the incompetence by so-called creating a single window in which all these things will have to pass through.
I'm glad you raised this single window. It has to do with, I believe, approval of buildings and so on, particularly in local government areas. In terms of the city of Georgetown, many agencies were involved in this process. The process was a drawn-out one because of how it was structured. The documents had to move from one agency to the other instead of all the agencies coming together at the table and dealing with the matter. So that the People's Progressive Party has latched on to that and is using that as a means of relieving the Georgetown City Council in particular of the authority to approve buildings in the city. Added to that, there is a solid waste bill that is in the parliament, I believe, tabled already, which seeks to relieve the city council, the Georgetown Mayor and City Council, of the operational responsibility of keeping the city clean. Having starved it of resources for so long, now they're going to, through legislation, remove that operational responsibility from the city council. They have already crippled the city council administratively by putting in place certain operatives in the local government called
Local.
so that, and in terms of its technical aspects of its operation, the city council is being stripped.
The PPP does not believe in local government. The PPP is very narrow-minded. Domination, control, and domination. And what you're seeing here is for the domination and control. They don't have a vision of local democracy in which local democracy has positives. If you have functioning NDCs, you're going to produce leaders and professional managers who manage those areas. As they learn and they improve, they will move up to the regional and to the national level. But you will be creating across the society a core of people that can manage a local government area, a leadership core of people that can become the public servants to those local authorities. And therefore, local democracy feeds in to the national democracy. But you're not democratic at the national level. You don't like local government because it doesn't give you total control. And the first opportunity they get, the PPP should be branded a party of interim management committees. One of the characteristics of the PPP, whenever they're in government, is once they cannot dominate and control, they move in the direction of trying to destroy elected representatives and put management committees in place. What you're seeing here is not a strategy to achieve the same objective: domination and control and the miniaturizing of local democracy. That is, in essence, what this government is doing.
I want to revisit the point you made about the boundary of the municipality was Wauna is a large community, a large settlement of people. So the local government minister decided that the extension of that boundary results in the creation of a new constituency. Wrong. It is GCOM that is supposed to now look at all of the outer boundaries of the local authority area and determine, based on the number of seats required, how many constituencies and where those boundaries must now fall. In other words, there has to be a restructuring of the entire local authority area. Now, if the Guyana Election Commission continues on this charade of sending people out there to say, come back and bless what the minister has done by order, it is going to harm local authority areas such as Mabaruma because of the population imbalance, the number of persons in different constituencies and so on. So is it not better for GCOM to adopt a position that says, let's holistically look at these changes and deliberately set these boundaries based on the predetermined rules that we have within GCOM and proceed with this matter as though it is a recommencement of the operation?
That is what should happen. But if you listen to the language of the thing today, you could have seen clearly the intention seems to be to rubber stamp what the minister said. My own view is that there are many elements in there that could be challenged in a court. Look, we have to legally now challenge this government on local government. In the local government law, there is a mechanism for objective criteria for allocation of resources. The government cannot arbitrarily decide they're giving this community and they're not giving Georgetown, they're not giving Linden. And it's something we have to challenge because the Constitution says there should be objective criteria for the allocation of resources. And not only at local government, we have to challenge it nationally as well. How do you explain doing 282 roads in Region 6? And this is the Vice President's words, not mine. As I understand it, things like population, size of region should determine. The single largest region is Region 4. And it has no way close, especially in the AP and UAFC areas, no way close to the amount of roads. The same is true about Region 10. You arbitrarily stop the Mabura to Linden Road. The British had to insist. The minister is such a liar that he went and said we did the whole road going into Linden. I went and checked it for myself. Under 100 feet where they had these holes, the minister at Wanejil paved that little piece, but goes to the National Assembly and said we did the whole road. And if you listen, misled the people of Guyana. And this is the kind of person you're dealing with. He said, oh, we did Matthews Lane. I know I'd seen piece of Matthews Lane done, and the piece wasn't completed. And Pompey Lane, which he claimed that they would have done, they just put the tar and they didn't put the bitumen to the top. There's some brick, what you kind of chip seal.
Chip seal, right?
But he was talking about how these roads were done. And so the PPP has a propaganda machinery at their disposal. And they don't like when you are on the ground exposing them. And to do that because they are hypocrites who will not do something but go out there and said they do it. I saw it was the minister Sonia, I don't remember her second name. I think it was she. I saw saying, we never promised 50,000 jobs. And people had to put up the poster that they had up about 50,000 jobs. When you arrive at a point where ministers of government know the evidence is out there, and in a very barefaced fashion will lie,
we're just about out of time. I want to thank you very much for taking time out from the last hour or so with us, with our viewers, clarifying issues. And to our viewers, I don't believe I'll be on here before Christmas after tonight. So I just like to take this opportunity to wish all our viewers, their families, friends, relatives, and may the Spirit of Christ be with you now and always. Until we meet again, God bless.
People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, presents Nation Watch.